PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale was a party platformer fighting game starring the iconic mascots of the Sony PlayStation. Released in November of 2012, the game suffered from numerous development hurdles that ended up severely hurting the final product. While it received mostly positive, albeit middling reviews, the game never really found a dedicated audience and quickly faded into obscurity. I like the game. It has its problems, to be sure, but I always try my best to find the value in a flawed product, and there is some genuine enjoyment to be found in the final version we got. I don't want to talk too much about the development problems that plagued the game, because there are already much better videos covering it from much better creators than myself, and that history is pretty well documented. I want to talk about the game's flaws, its merits, and what a sequel could learn from the first game's faults. I'll be talking about the good, the bad, and theorizing my own ideas on how I would build a second installment. If that doesn't interest you, move along. The biggest complaint levied at the game was its general lack of content. There was a consistent desire for more characters, stages, music, game modes, etc., particularly in regards to missing classics from the PS1 era. I certainly had my list of most wanted characters, as I'm sure many of you did. But that's a problem a video can't really solve outside of the writer specifically saying who they personally think should be on the roster. I'm not going to touch on this because my ideal roster is not everyone's ideal roster, and I won't even try to pretend like I know what people want. The next biggest complaint came from people calling the game a ripoff of Super Smash Bros., and it was, to an extent. A crossover, platform-based fighting game that featured a roster of characters from games mostly exclusive to a single console family? The comparison was inevitable. Fortunately, since the release of All-Stars, there's been a number of Smash-likes, released mostly by the indie community. Games like Brawlhalla, Rivals of Aether, and Brawlout, to name a few. These games have had overall positive reception and show that there is room for games to take inspiration from the Smash Bros. Formula. And there's always going to be some similarities when designing a fighting game. I personally prefer Mortal Kombat over Street Fighter, even though by this logic, Mortal Kombat is the ripoff. So there should be room for a game like PlayStation All-Stars, considering its roster would consist of popular characters that could never make it into Smash, right? Well, yes and no. Some would argue that a game like PlayStation All-Stars really can't work just because of the library of characters Sony has to work with. Characters from M-rated games hopping around in a bright, happy platform fighter just doesn't feel right.
This is gonna be fun.
Kill or be killed.
Ready? Fight!
Though I disagree, I'm of the belief that a fan of any series would just be excited to see the character they like get some appreciation when crossing over with another game. Even better if it's with another game they already like. Even more betterer if it's with over 20 games they like. Sure, there's not going to be a ton of overlap between the Crash Bandicoot and God of War fandoms, but it's not impossible. I know that because I exist. But that's not really the point anyway. It should be treated as a celebration of the history of these games and how far the console family has come since 1994. There should be room for every PlayStation fan at this table. Well, that's the list of things I can't solve. No matter how many mental gymnastics I do to try and solve them, there will always be people who just won't budge on those points. And they are valid criticisms, make no mistake. But I don't personally agree with them, and there's not much to say beyond that. Now on to the things that can be fixed. The biggest problem with All-Stars from a gameplay perspective is that it wanted to be different from Smash Bros. And when anything, especially a video game, defines itself by its difference from its contemporaries, it ends up losing any personality it might have had on its own. All-Stars fell into this trap. Its biggest gameplay feature designed to make it different from Smash was poorly implemented, and the game as a whole suffered for it. For the uninitiated, the main system of Smash Bros. Revolves around knocking an opponent out of the arena. Attacking the opponent fills their percentage meter, and the higher the percentage, the further they fly when they take a big hit. Eventually they get knocked off screen, resulting in a KO, and their percentage drops back down to 0. The fight continues on like this until all stocks are depleted, or when time runs out if you're a weirdo. In All-Stars, there are a handful of stages where characters can get knocked off screen, but they respawn in seconds with no real penalty. Most stages are just elaborate boxes the characters are trapped within. In All-Stars, your basic attacks will fill your own character's super meter up to 3 levels, with each level being a different super move. The higher the level, the more effective they are, and the only way to KO an opponent is to land a super move on them. This is an okay idea in theory, but in practice there are several problems. For starters, the supers take a while to charge up, and the lower the level, the harder they are to land. This means that the early parts of a match are about landing attacks that don't accomplish anything other than building meter. When somebody gets a super, everyone else starts playing defensively in order to avoid getting KO'd, and considering how difficult it is to land most level 1 supers, you're more than likely to miss and lose the super entirely. You could build up to a level 2 or 3, but that's also much harder to do now that everyone else is playing defensively, avoiding you like the plague, and now you can barely land any of your normal attacks to boot. All of this culminates into a tedious experience where you land meaningless attacks to build up a super that you'll probably miss and will have to start over and repeat the process. This is less likely if you're playing with a full 4-person match, or with AI characters, because you couldn't find anyone willing to play PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale for your dumb video. But eventually those stocks get whittled down, and as more and more characters get eliminated, the more likely this is to happen. Another problem, in addition to the tedium, is that the majority of the match will feel meaningless. A player could be absolutely dominating during the portion of the match where super meters are being built, but when the match boils down to whether or not you land that one single super move, you're liable to miss the attack, leave yourself open to the opponent, and get KO'd. This could easily happen multiple times per match, and because the skill you display for most of the fight has no reward, the entire match can feel meaningless as a result. But wait, there's another problem with this system. Being able to end the match by landing a big flashy super move is exciting in any fighting game. Everyone loves to do it. But when the only way you're able to KO an opponent is with a super, it loses some of its luster. Inversely, it's also exciting to narrowly avoid getting hit by a big flashy super and then be able to land a normal on the opponent for the KO against all odds. Options are the funnest thing any character can have in any fighting game, but when there's a massive limitation to the entire roster, like only being able to land a knockout by super, it ends up hurting the overall game. Okay, so the super system has some compounding problems, and when the main element of a game is so inherently flawed, the entire game will be flawed. That being said, it's easy to criticize without solution, and I actually want to bring something to the table here. So let's talk about what's worth keeping and what needs to change. First of all, the super system is a good idea. Having big flashy moves that harken back to the games these characters originate from will be a fun addition for longtime fans. However, supers shouldn't be the only way to KO an opponent. The variation will only do the game favors in its general match structure. In addition, there should be no guarantee that a super will knock out the opponent, it's just more likely to. Also, if supers are no longer the only way to get the knockout, and not a guaranteed knockout, then there should be no problem with making them easier to land. Especially low-level supers that have been integrated into a combo string. This kind of combo structure is the foundation of hyper fighters like the Marvel vs. Capcom series, and it would be fascinating to see it well implemented into a platform fighter. And it's a platform-based fighting game, so being able to get knocked out of the ring should be included to give the platforming actual meaning. Navigation and recovery are just as important to this style of game as actually attacking the opponent. Even if you have ridiculous amounts of damage and get thrown super far away from a big hit, good recovery can save your stock and turn the tide of a match. All-Stars had surprisingly in-depth combo potential for most of the characters across the board. This was a nice addition, but again, because normals only serve to charge supers, there should be more meaning to this combo system. Dedicated players will spend hours in the lab trying to find the optimal damage combo for their favorite character, but not many people will look for the optimal meter building combo. Okay, final point, and this is the weirdest / most petty one, but the square button just doesn't feel right. It's hard to explain, but if you're familiar with Smash Bros., then you would expect it to act like the A button, with very simple normal attacks, but it doesn't. It feels like the B button with multi-directional specials, and so do the triangle and circle buttons. This is a Smash-like with 3 B buttons and no A button. Just a bit of game feel that needs to be changed. Okay, so just to give a quick example, when you're playing as Sly Cooper, you'll run to the opponent to land a basic cane combo, but because you're holding the stick to the side as you run, he instead does his knockout dive attack, where he'll hit the opponent and go through them onto the other side. This means that Sly will have to turn around to hit them properly, but because you're moving the stick again to turn, he'll do another dive if you're too quick, and if you're too slow, the opponent has already moved away. It felt the worst with Sly, but it's a problem that most of the roster has. So with all this in mind, here's my proposal for a new All-Stars system. Characters would have a stagger meter near their icon at the bottom of the screen. The more they get attacked, the more the stagger meter fills. The more the meter fills, the further they fly, and the easier it'll be to knock them out of the ring for a KO. However, to differentiate this from Smash Bros., if the character is not attacked for some time, their stagger meter will drain as they regain their poise. This gives the in-depth combo system meaning, as the player who manages to master their combo paths have a better chance of filling the stagger meter in one go. This change also means that supers are still going to be the most likely way to KO an opponent, even if their stagger is low, but also means that they won't be guaranteed the knockout depending on what super is used and how full the stagger meter is at the time. To reduce wasted time, the stagger meter should take a while to drain. It should be painfully slow, so players with keep-away tactics don't have an overt inherent advantage. Easy to fill but difficult to empty. This can help ensure that it still feels like you're doing tangible damage, even if you're having difficulty landing the killing blow over the course of the match. Additionally, performing parries, perfect blocks, or perfect dodges can also help lower the stagger meter faster. Different supers can have different effects. While most supers would have high launch potential to knock the opponent out of the ring, others could deal massive damage to the stagger meter, making it easier to KO the opponent with a normal. Think about Sir Daniel's piddly level 1 Lightning Blast super that was near impossible to land in the original All-Stars. With this new system in mind, you can change the super so that his lightning has a much larger blast radius and is far easier to land. It could deal no real damage and wouldn't launch the opponent at all, but it would instantly fill the stagger meter and allow for Sir Dan to land the KO with a strong normal attack. And some high-level supers could still be instant kill attacks like in the original, but take much longer to charge. This could also allow some level 3s to act as a buff to the character that lasts until they get KO'd, and they're then limited to only level 1 and 2 supers during this time. Is this a good system? Probably not. I'm not a game designer, but I do enjoy analyzing game design as a whole. I'm sure there are plenty of holes to poke in this theoretical design document. A brand new system entirely might be the best thing for a sequel, but I'm trying to save what I like about the original. But that's kind of the problem with PlayStation All-Stars on the whole, though. There's a lot of great ideas in the game that get tied up in a collection of minor flaws, mostly caused by the low budget and the uphill battle that was trying to differentiate themselves from Super Smash Bros. The supers were big, fun, and flashy, even if the system as a whole was flawed. The rival fights were dumb, goofy fun, even if most of them were just the bare minimum to justify the rivals actually having a fight. The progression system to unlock alternate costumes, taunts, victory animations, and more was a great way to keep players engaged, even if there should have been more of all of these to keep the player engaged for longer. Polygon Man is a novel idea for a main villain. The failed mascot of the PS1 trying to destroy the new mascots is a great idea, even if his boss fight sucks. It sucks so bad. And the fact that every stage is a mashup of 2 or more franchises is a great idea. There is no but for this one. The stages in All-Stars are legitimately fantastic. The idea of this was to fix the compounding gameplay problems so that the actual experience of playing the game was more enjoyable, but that still doesn't fix the real problem. If Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite has taught us anything, it's that it doesn't matter how fun the game actually is. If it's a crossover fighting game, it needs to have a great roster and amazing visuals to attract the fans of every series involved. I could talk about my ideal roster all day. I'd love to, in fact. But mostly I just want to see an All-Stars game get the same love and polish that Smash gets, both in terms of fan service and gameplay. All-Stars had a lot of great ideas. I don't think anyone would be against seeing a version where these ideas can be fully realized. It's unlikely that we'll ever get a sequel to this hot mess of a game, but I don't want to say it's impossible. If we do see a return to the series, it could be something entirely different. A traditional fighting game, a kart racer, a team-based hero game, or God forbid a digital card game. The PlayStation still has an incredible legacy of franchises that is worthy of celebration, and I do sincerely hope we get some kind of game in the future that is unadulterated fan service to the folks who've stuck by the console family for many years and love the games intrinsically tied to it. Just because this one game ended up being a hot mess doesn't mean the idea and intention wasn't good, and I do believe that the team who worked on the original All-Stars really did have nothing but respect and admiration for the source material of what they had to work with. I'd like to see another attempt from a similar team with better funding and more third-party companies willing to work with them. If we ever do get a sequel to PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, whether it be with similar mechanics or completely new ones, at least we can all take solace in the knowledge that there will never, ever be a fucking Fire Emblem character on the roster. Bye!